a human discovers a 1,789-year-old abandoned starship, sparking a galactic journey. Part 1. The Discovery. Sun sat alone in the cockpit of his small ship, the Wanderer. Outside the window, asteroids floated in the darkness like sleeping giants. He had been working in this part of space for 3 years now, far beyond Neptune, where few humans ever traveled. He was a salvage operator. His job was simple: find old satellites, broken ships, and forgotten equipment, bring them back, sell them for money. It was lonely work, but Sun preferred it that way. After losing his wife and daughter in a mining accident on Mars, he had no desire to be around other people. The silence of space matched the silence in his heart. His scanner beeped. Sun looked at the screen and frowned. There was an energy signature coming from a cluster of asteroids about 2 hours away. This was strange. No one operated in this region. There were no stations, no colonies, nothing but rocks and ice. He almost ignored it. Almost. But curiosity was the one thing that still burned inside him. It was the reason he had become an explorer in the first place, long before tragedy changed his life. Sun adjusted his course and flew toward the signal. When he arrived, he could not believe what he saw. Half buried in ice and rock was a ship, but it was not like any ship he had ever seen. It was massive, at least 2 kilometers long, with smooth curves and a dark surface that seemed to absorb light. There were no visible windows, no engines he could recognize, no markings from any known species. Sun had encountered alien vessels before. Humanity had made contact with several galactic civilizations over the past century. He knew what ships looked like and warships and vessels. This was none of those. This was something older, much older. He brought the Wanderer closer and found what looked like an entrance. His heart was beating fast as he put on his suit and crossed through the airlock. The moment he stepped inside the ancient ship, the air changed. It was warm, breathable. After nearly 2,000 years, the life support systems were still working. The interior was beautiful in a strange way. The walls curved like the inside of a seashell, covered in patterns that might have been writing or might have been art. Soft blue lights glowed along the floor, guiding him deeper into the vessel. Sun walked for what felt like hours. He passed through empty rooms filled with strange objects he could not understand. Tables that floated without support, screens that showed images of stars he did not recognize. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, but nothing was broken. It was as if the ship had simply been waiting. Finally, he reached what appeared to be a control room. In the center stood a pillar made of something like glass, filled with swirling light. Sun approached it carefully. When he touched it, the light exploded outward, and a voice filled the room. The language was unlike anything he had heard. It was musical, flowing, with sounds that seemed to come from everywhere at once. But as the seconds passed, the words began to change. They shifted, adapted, until finally they became something he could understand. Identification confirmed. Biological signature matches target parameters. You are human. Sun stumbled backward. What are you? I am Vessel 7. I was created by the architects to wait for those who would answer the signal. My waiting has lasted 1,789 standard years. Sun's mind struggled to process this. The architects. He had heard myths, legends passed around by alien traders in cantinas, a species that existed before all others, a species that vanished without explanation. Most scientists believed they were just stories. The signal, Sun said slowly. What signal? The signal was sent when the architects departed this galaxy. It was designed to be answered only by a species that had reached a certain level of development. You answered 3 of your weeks ago. Sun shook his head. He had not answered any signal, but then he remembered. 3 weeks ago, he had boosted his scanner to maximum power while searching for a lost satellite. He had accidentally broadcast on an unusual frequency. That was a mistake, he said. I did not mean to answer anything. Intent is not required, only action. You are here. The waiting is over. The lights in the room grew brighter. Screens activated around him, showing star maps and data streams in languages he could not read. And then Vessel 7 asked a question that made his blood run cold. Are you the ones who answered? Are you the inheritors? Sun did not know how to respond. He was just one man, a broken man who had run away from Earth to escape his grief. How could he be an inheritor of anything? I am just a salvage operator, he said quietly. I am nobody. That is not for you to decide, Vessel 7 replied. The architects left instructions. When the signal was answered, certain protocols would activate, information would be shared, and the location of the garden would be revealed. The garden? What is the garden? But before Vessel 7 could answer, alarms began to sound across the galaxy. On 100 different worlds, sensors detected something that had been silent for almost 2,000 years. An ancient frequency, broadcasting from the edge of human space. They recognized it immediately. Their elders gathered in emergency sessions, their faces pale with a mixture of fear and wonder. The Dominion scrambled their war fleets, seeing opportunity in the chaos. The collective simply watched and waited, as they always did. And on Earth, confused officials tried to understand why every alien ambassador was suddenly demanding to know what humanity had found. Sun stood alone in the control room of an impossible ship, unaware that his accidental discovery had just changed the course of galactic history. He was nobody, he had said, but the universe had decided otherwise. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance, but something had shifted, something had awakened, and nothing would ever be the same again. Vessel 7's voice echoed through the empty halls. Welcome, inheritor, the journey begins now. A human discovers a 1,789-year-old abandoned starship, sparking a galactic journey. Part 2, The Gathering Storm. 3 weeks had passed since Sun's discovery, and the asteroid field was no longer empty. Dozens of ships now surrounded the ancient vessel. Military cruisers from Earth formed a protective ring around the area. Beyond them, alien vessels waited like hungry wolves, each one belonging to a different galactic power. Sun stood at the entrance of the ship he had found, watching a shuttle approach from the human flagship. He had not slept properly in days. Every government on Earth wanted to talk to him. Every scientist wanted to study what he had found. And every alien civilization wanted access to the ship they were now calling the progenitor. The shuttle landed, and 3 people stepped out. The first was a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and gray streaks in her black hair. She walked with the confidence of someone who had spent her life studying impossible things. Son, she asked, I am doctor I specialize in. Sun nodded. He had heard of her. She was famous for decoding ancient ruins on Europa. Behind her came a military officer with a stern face and broad shoulders. Commander, he said, I am responsible for security here. I hope you understand the importance of what you have found. I understand that everyone wants to take it from me, Sun replied. His expression did not change. We are here to protect it and to protect you. The third person was not human. They were tall and thin, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. Their eyes were large and completely black, and they moved with an elegance that made humans look clumsy by comparison. This was the ambassador. Mr. said, their voice was soft, almost musical. My people have waited many generations to see this day. We always hoped the architects were real. Now we know. Sun led them inside the progenitor. As they walked through the curved hallways, could not contain her excitement. She touched the walls, examined the strange symbols, and took photographs of everything. This material, she whispered, I have never seen anything like it. It is not metal, not stone, not organic. It is something completely new. They reached the control room where Vessel 7 waited. The AI had been quiet since the humans arrived, observing but not speaking unless Sun asked it questions directly. Vessel 7, Sun said, "These people want to learn about the architects. Will you speak with them?" The pillar of light pulsed gently. "I will answer what I can. Some knowledge is restricted until certain conditions are met." Stepped forward eagerly. "Can you tell us who the architects were? Where did they come from?" The architects arose in this galaxy approximately 400,000 years before your current era. They were the first species to achieve interstellar travel. They seeded life across thousands of worlds and watched as new civilizations grew. Made a sound of surprise. "The legends say they created us. Is this true?" The architects guided evolution on many worlds. They did not create from nothing. They encouraged what already existed. Crossed his arms, and then they disappeared. Why? Vessel 7 paused before answering. The architects foresaw an event they called the Silence. They believed their presence was preventing younger species from reaching their full potential, so they chose to leave. Leave asked, "Leave to where?" "To the garden, a sanctuary they built between galaxies, a place where they would wait to see if their children were worthy of their inheritance." The room fell silent. Sun felt a weight settling on his shoulders. The inheritance. He remembered Vessel 7 using that word when they first spoke. Over the following days, more alien ships arrived. The Dominion sent 3 warships, their hulls covered in weapons. There were warriors, a species that had conquered a dozen star systems through force. Their commander, a massive creature named, demanded immediate access to the progenitor. "This discovery belongs to the galaxy," announced through a communication channel. "No single species has the right to claim it." "The ship is in human space," replied firmly. "We will decide who enters." "Be careful, Commander," growled. "The Dominion does not make requests twice." The collective also sent representatives, though they kept their distance. There were strange beings, each one a colony of millions of tiny organisms working together as a single mind. They did not speak often, but when they did, their words carried weight. Meanwhile, sought out privately. The ambassador found her in one of the progenitor's many rooms, studying a device that seemed to project 3-dimensional star maps. "Doctor," said quietly, "I must warn you about something." Looked up, "Warn me." "My people have stories about this ship. Very old stories, passed down from a time before we had writing. They say the architects left behind great power but also great danger." "What kind of danger?" Moved closer, their voice dropping to a whisper. "The stories say that the signal was not meant for everyone. It was a test, and those who fail the test, they do not survive." Felt a chill run down her spine. "What happens to them?" "I do not know, but I know this. You should have let it sleep. Whatever the architects left behind, it was not meant to be found. Not yet, perhaps not ever." Before could respond, alarms rang through the ship. Sun's voice came over the communication system. "Everyone to the control room. Now, something is happening." When they arrived, they found Vessel 7 displaying a tactical map. The warships were moving, breaking formation and heading directly toward the progenitor. "They are launching boarding craft," reported, his face grim. "Is trying to take the ship by force." "Can we stop them?" asked. Before anyone could answer, Vessel 7 spoke. "Hostile approach detected, activating defensive protocols." The entire ship hummed with energy. Outside, the boarding craft suddenly stopped in mid-flight, held in place by invisible forces. Then, gently but firmly, they were pushed backward, away from the progenitor. On his warship, roared with fury. He fired weapons at the ancient vessel, but the beams simply disappeared before touching the hull. It was as if the progenitor existed in a different reality, untouchable by anything the modern galaxy could produce. "Impossible," hissed. "What technology is this?" In the control room, Sun stared at the display in amazement. Vessel 7 had protected them without causing any damage, without harming anyone. The power it controlled was beyond imagination, yet it used that power with perfect restraint. Vessel 7, Sun said slowly. The garden, you said the architects are waiting there. Can this ship take us to them? Yes, but there is a condition. What condition? I will only travel to the garden with the one who answered the signal. You, Sun, the choice is yours. The journey is yours, but you must choose. Sun looked at the faces around him, full of wonder and fear, calculating risks, ancient eyes hiding secrets. Outside, the waited, and beyond them, a galaxy full of species who wanted what the progenitor contained. The choice was his, and whatever he decided would change everything. A human discovers a 1,789-year-old abandoned starship, sparking a galactic journey. Part 3, the journey begins. The progenitor moved through space in a way that should have been impossible. There was no engine burn, no visible propulsion. The ancient ship simply moved, sliding through the darkness like a fish through water. Behind them, the asteroid field and all its gathered ships disappeared into the distance. Sun stood in the control room with his small crew. After much argument with Earth's government, he had been allowed to choose who would accompany him. He picked 4 people. Was the first choice. Her knowledge of ancient civilizations would be essential. Came as military protection, though Sun suspected he was also there to report everything back to Earth leaders. The other 2 were younger. Park was a pilot and engineer, 29 years old with a quick smile and clever hands. He had volunteered within minutes of hearing about the mission. How could I say no? He had asked. This is the greatest discovery in human history. I want to be part of it. The last member was Lieutenant Shin, a security officer from the same unit as. She was calm and quiet, the kind of person who noticed everything but said little. Sun liked her immediately. Where exactly are we going? Asked, studying the navigation displays. These coordinates do not match any star system in our database. We are traveling to a gate, Vessel 7 explained. The architects built a network of passages through space. These gates have been dormant since their departure. The progenitor carries the codes to activate them. A gate network, breathed. They have legends about such things. They call them the God Roads. The designation is acceptable. The first gate is approximately 4 hours away at current velocity. Moved to a window and looked out at the stars. They were moving so fast that the stars seemed to stretch into lines of light. Commander, she said I am detecting something behind us. Another ship. Joined her at the window, his expression darkened. They are following us. How is that possible? Sun demanded. We left them far behind. The vessel attached a tracking device to your original ship, the Wanderer, Vessel 7 reported. The Wanderer is stored in my cargo bay. Therefore, they can follow our signal. Laughed nervously. Well, that is not good. Should we stop and remove the tracker? Asked. Negative. Stopping would allow them to catch us. The tracker is harmless for now. We will address it later. Sun felt frustration building in his chest. Even out here, beyond all known space, they could not escape the greed of others. They wanted the architect's technology for war. They would not stop following until they got it. 4 hours later, they arrived at the first gate. It was massive, a ring of dark material floating in empty space, at least 50 kilometers across. There were no lights, no signs of power. It looked completely dead. Initiating activation sequence, Vessel 7 announced. Energy flowed from the progenitor into the ancient ring. Slowly, lights began to appear along its surface. The center of the ring shimmered like water, then turned into something else entirely. A tunnel of swirling blue light opened before them. The gate is active. Transit time to next junction, instantaneous from your perspective. Actual distance covered, 47,000 light years. 47,000 light years, repeated in amazement. That is nearly halfway across the galaxy. The progenitor moved forward and entered the gate. There was no sensation of movement, no feeling of transition. One moment they were in familiar space. The next moment they were somewhere completely different. The stars outside had changed. Constellation's sun had known his entire life were gone, replaced by new patterns. A great nebula glowed red and gold in the distance, filling half the sky with color. "Where are we?" asked softly. "We are in a region the architects called the distant shore. No current civilization has ever traveled here. The next gate is 2 days away." During those 2 days, the crew explored the progenitor properly for the first time. The ship was enormous, filled with rooms and chambers that served purposes they could not understand. Discovered a workshop filled with tools that responded to touch, changing shape based on what the user needed. Found an observation deck with windows that could magnify distant objects millions of times. But it was who made the most important discovery. Deep in the ship's lower levels, she found a chamber filled with preserved bodies. "Son," she called through her communicator, "you need to see this." When the crew gathered in the chamber, they stood in silence. The bodies were held in transparent containers, perfectly preserved. They were humanoid, tall and slender, with skin that shifted colors even in death. Their faces were peaceful, almost beautiful. "Are these the architects?" asked. "Yes," Vessel 7 confirmed. "These were the crew of this vessel. They chose to enter stasis when the progenitor was placed on watch duty. They did not survive the full duration. Their bodies remain as a record." Studied the nearest body carefully. "They look almost human. The bone structure, the proportions. If I did not know better, I would say we are related." "You are," Vessel 7 said. "The architects seeded your world 300,000 years ago. You are one of their children species." The revelation hit them like a physical force. Humans were not just another species that evolved by accident. They were deliberately created, guided, shaped by beings who had existed before the stars themselves were young. "Why?" Sun asked. "Why create us?" The architects believed diversity was strength. They wanted the galaxy to be filled with life, with different perspectives, different approaches to existence. Each species they created was given gifts and challenges. They hoped their children would one day surpass them. Before anyone could respond, alarms rang through the ship. "The vessel has arrived," Vessel 7 announced. "They followed us through the gate." On the display, the warship emerged from the still-active portal. It was and damaged, clearly having forced its way through a gate not designed for its technology, but it was still functional, still dangerous. A communication signal came through. His face appeared on the screen, his features twisted with anger and determination. "Human," he growled, "you cannot run forever. The Dominion's reach extends to every corner of existence. Surrender the ship and its knowledge, and I will let you live." Sun looked at his crew, was afraid but determined, stood ready for battle, gripped a console nervously, had already drawn her weapon. Sun said calmly, "I do not own this ship. I cannot give it to you, and even if I could, I would not. The architects did not leave their inheritance for conquerors." Laughed a harsh and ugly sound. "Then you will die knowing your stubbornness killed your crew. Prepare to be boarded." The ship moved closer, weapons charging. "Vessel 7, Sun said quietly, "I do not want to fight, but I will not let them take this ship. Can you help us?" "I can protect the ship, but the choice of how to deal with them must be yours. The architects believed in free will. I cannot make decisions for you." Sun closed his eyes. He had run from responsibility his entire life. After his family died, he had hidden in the emptiness of space, avoiding connections, avoiding choices. But now, standing on an ancient ship beyond the edge of known space, he realized he could not run anymore. "Get us to the next gate," he said, "and if they follow, we will deal with them when we arrive." The progenitor accelerated, racing toward whatever waited ahead. Behind them pursued, hungry for power he did not understand. And somewhere beyond the galaxy itself, the garden waited for its guests. A human discovers a 1,789-year-old abandoned starship, sparking a galactic journey. Part 4: The Garden. The final gate deposited them in darkness. For a long moment there were no stars, no light, nothing at all. They had traveled beyond the galaxy itself, into the void between islands of matter. Then pointed at the window. There, what is that? A light was growing in the distance, not a star but something else. As the progenitor moved closer, the crew began to understand what they were seeing. A planet floated alone in the emptiness, surrounded by an artificial sun. The sun was small, perhaps only 1,000 kilometers across, but it burned with steady golden light, and the planet beneath it was covered in green. "The garden," Vessel 7 announced. "Final destination reached. Welcome to the sanctuary of the architects." Pressed her hands against the window, tears forming in her eyes. "It is beautiful. After nearly 2,000 years, life still grows here." "The garden was designed to be self-sustaining," Vessel 7 explained. "The artificial sun will burn for another 100,000 years. The ecosystems below require no maintenance. It is a perfect world, preserved for those who would find it." The progenitor descended through the atmosphere. Below them, forests stretched across vast continents. Rivers sparkled in the sunlight. Cities rose from valleys and hilltops, their towers still standing after almost two of silence. They landed in a clearing near the largest city. When the crew stepped outside, they breathed air that smelled of flowers and growing things. Birds sang in the trees. Small creatures watched them from the bushes with curious eyes. "This is impossible," said. "A completely functional biosphere, maintained for thousands of years without any inhabitants." "The architects were very thorough," replied, kneeling to examine a flower. "They built this place to last." Sun felt strange walking through the empty streets of the city. The buildings were elegant, constructed from materials that seemed to grow from the ground like trees. There were no signs of decay, no damage. It was as if the inhabitants had simply stepped out for a moment and would return at any time. "Where should we go?" asked, her weapon ready. "The Central Archive," Vessel 7 guided them. "That is where the architects stored their final message. That is where you will learn the truth." They walked for an hour through the silent city, made notes about everything he saw, recording the technology and architecture for future study, collected samples of plants and materials, remained alert, watching for any sign of danger. But there was no danger here, only peace. The Central Archive was a great dome at the heart of the city, covered in the same shifting patterns that decorated the progenitor. Inside, countless shelves held objects that might have been books, or might have been something entirely different. Screens covered the walls, dark and waiting. When they entered the main chamber, the screens activated. Light filled the room, and a figure appeared before them. It was an architect projected in perfect detail. Tall and graceful, with eyes that held wisdom beyond human understanding. When it spoke, its voice was gentle. "If you are seeing this message, then the signal has been answered. We congratulate you on completing the journey. We knew that someday, one of our children would find their way home." Gasped, "It is a recording, a message left for whoever arrived." The projection continued. "We are the architects. We existed for 400,000 years before we chose to leave. In that time we built great things. We seeded life across the galaxy. We watched our children grow, but we also saw a pattern that troubled us." The screens showed images. Civilizations rising and falling, wars and destruction, species reaching for the stars, then destroying themselves. "We realized that our presence was causing harm. As long as we existed, our children looked to us for guidance. They never learned to find their own path. They fought over our attention, our approval, our technology. We were holding them back. Sun listened with growing understanding. The architects had not abandoned the galaxy because they were weak or dying. They had left because they loved their children too much to keep controlling them. So we made a choice. We would remove ourselves from the galaxy entirely. We would give our children the freedom to succeed or fail on their own terms. But we also left behind a test, a signal that would only be answered by a species ready to inherit our knowledge. The projection turned and looked directly at them. Even though it was a recording, Sun felt like it could see into his soul. You have passed the first test by finding this place. But the true test is not the journey. It is what you do with what you find here. The garden contains all our knowledge, all our technology, all our history. It could make your species the most powerful in the galaxy, or it could destroy you if you are not ready. The message ended. The room fell silent. Before anyone could speak, a new sound filled the air. The thunder of engines. Through the dome's windows, they saw a ship descending through the clouds. They had arrived. Its warship landed heavily in the city square, crushing ancient structures beneath its weight. Soldiers poured out, weapons drawn, spreading through the streets. Within minutes, they had surrounded the archive. Himself strode through the entrance, his massive form blocking the light. Behind him, a dozen armed warriors took positions around the room. "So this is the garden," said, looking around with hungry eyes. "And this is the knowledge of the architects. I must thank you, human. Without you, we would never have found this place." And raised their weapons, but they were badly outnumbered. Laughed. "Put those down. You cannot win this fight. Be reasonable. Give me what I want and I will let you live." "What do you want?" Sun asked. "Everything," spread his arms wide. "The technology, the weapons, the secrets. The Dominion will become the masters of the galaxy. No species will dare oppose us." Stepped forward angrily. "You did not hear the message. The architects warned against exactly this kind of thinking. This knowledge is not meant for conquest." Backhanded her across the face, sending her crashing to the floor. Rushed to help her. "I do not care what dead creatures believed," snarled. "Power belongs to those strong enough to take it. That is the only truth that matters." Sun felt fury building inside him, but he also felt something else, a calm certainty that had been growing since he first touched Vessel 7. He understood now why the architects had built this test. It was not about intelligence or technology. It was about what kind of people would use their inheritance. He walked toward a console at the center of the room. "What are you doing?" demanded. "Making a choice," Sun replied. He placed his hand on the console. Vessel 7 had told him about this moment. The archive was protected by a final security system. It would only fully activate for someone who understood the architect's values. "Vessel 7, Sun said, begin the awakening protocol." The room shook. Light poured from the walls. And somewhere deep beneath the garden, something that had slept for nearly 2,000 years began to open its eyes. Screamed orders at his soldiers, but their weapons suddenly stopped working. The power that had protected the progenitor now filled the entire planet. "What have you done?" roared. Sun turned to face him. "I woke the last guardian, I woke the keeper." A door opened at the far end of the chamber, and from the darkness beyond, a figure emerged. Tall and impossibly old, with eyes that had seen the birth and death of stars. Not a projection this time. A living architect, the last of their kind. The keeper had awakened. A human discovers a 1,789-year-old abandoned starship, sparking a galactic journey. Part 5: The Inheritance. The keeper stood taller than any being Sun had ever seen. They moved slowly, as if each step required great effort after so many years of sleep. Their skin shifted through colors like sunset clouds, and their eyes were deep pools of ancient light. No one moved. Not the humans, not the... even stood frozen, his anger replaced by something he had never felt before: fear. The keeper looked around the room, taking in everything. The damaged city visible through the windows, the armed soldiers, the small group of humans standing together. When they spoke, their voice was like wind through old trees. "So, after all this time, someone has come." Vessel Seven's voice echoed through the chamber. "Keeper, I have completed my task." These humans answered the signal. They completed the journey. The keeper nodded slowly. "I see. And who are these others?" They gestured toward and his soldiers. "They are," Sun said. "They followed us. They want to take your knowledge for themselves, to use it for war." Recovered his voice. "We are the Dominion. We have conquered a dozen star systems. We fear nothing." But his words sounded hollow. The keeper turned their ancient eyes on. For a long moment, they simply studied him, as if reading every thought he had ever had. "I remember your people," the keeper said finally. "We seeded your world 90,000 years ago. You were meant to be warriors, yes, but also protectors, guardians of the weak. Instead, you chose only conquest." His face twisted. "We became strong, that is what matters. Strength without wisdom is just destruction." The keeper turned away from him dismissively. "You have failed the test. You are not inheritors. You are exactly what we hoped our children would never become." Roared and raised his weapon. "I will not be dismissed by a relic of the past." He fired. The blast should have killed the keeper instantly. Instead, it simply stopped, frozen in midair, then faded away like smoke. The keeper had not moved, had not even looked. "Your weapons cannot harm me," the keeper said. "The technology I carry is beyond anything you can imagine. I could destroy your entire fleet with a thought, but I will not. Violence is not our way." They raised one hand. Throughout the room, every weapon crumbled to dust. The soldiers stumbled backward in terror. "Go," the keeper commanded. "Return to your people. Tell them what you have seen here. Tell them that the inheritance is not for those who seek power. Perhaps in another 1,000 years your species will learn wisdom. Perhaps not." Wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but he had nothing left. His weapons were gone. His soldiers were broken. And the being before him could apparently destroy planets without effort. "This is not over," growled as he retreated. "Yes," the keeper replied gently, "it is." They fled. Their damaged ship lifted off and disappeared through the atmosphere, running back through the gates toward known space. When they were gone, the keeper finally turned their full attention to the humans. Sun felt the weight of that ancient gaze, measuring him, evaluating everything he was. "Now," the keeper said, "let us speak properly. I am the last of my people. I volunteered to remain behind, to sleep through the ages, to wait for this moment. I have one purpose: to judge those who arrive." Stepped forward, her cheek still bruised from his blow. "Judge us? How?" "By understanding why you came, by seeing what is in your hearts." The keeper moved closer to Sun. You are the one who answered the signal. Tell me, why did you come?" Sun thought carefully before answering. He could lie, could say noble things about humanity's destiny or the pursuit of knowledge. But looking into the keeper's eyes, he knew that lies would be useless. "I came because I was curious," he said honestly. "I was a broken man, running from grief, hiding in empty space. When I found the ship, I was not looking for power or glory. I just wanted to understand. I wanted to know that there was more to the universe than loss and pain." The keeper nodded. "And now, what do you want now?" "I want to take this knowledge home. Not to make humanity powerful, but to give them hope. To show them that we are not alone, that we are part of something larger. That maybe, if we try hard enough, we can be worthy of the chance we have been given." For a long moment the keeper was silent. Then slowly they smiled. "Vessel 7 chose well when it answered your signal. You are indeed what we hoped for. Unfinished, imperfect, capable of great cruelty and great kindness, but above all capable of growth." The keeper raised their hand, and the archive came fully alive. Every screen, every console, every storage device activated simultaneously. This is the inheritance of the architects. All our knowledge, all our history, all our mistakes and triumphs. I give it to your species, not as a gift, but as a responsibility. They looked at each human in turn. You must become guardians of this knowledge. Share it with those who come in peace. Protect it from those who would abuse it. Help your children's species reach their potential just as we helped you. But why us? Asked. Humans have done terrible things. Wars, genocide, destruction of our own world. Why trust us? The keeper considered the question. Because you are still trying. Because you know your flaws and fight against them. Because when I look into your hearts, I see guilt and shame for your failures, but also hope and determination to do better. They moved to a raised platform at the center of the room. I have waited nearly 2,000 years for this moment. My task is complete. I can finally rest. Spoke for the first time since they had arrived. What will happen to you? I will return to sleep, perhaps forever this time, or perhaps someday another species will come and I will wake again to judge them. The keeper looked at the humans with something like affection. Take care of the garden. It belongs to all our children now. Any species that wishes to learn can come here, but you must be the caretakers. They touched a control and light surrounded them. Slowly, the keeper's form began to fade, returning to the stasis that had preserved them for so long. One last thing, the keeper said, their voice growing distant. Remember that we did not leave because we were perfect. We left because we were flawed. We made mistakes. We caused harm. In the end, the best thing we could do was step aside and let you find your own way. The light intensified, then faded. The keeper was gone, sleeping once more. Sun stood in the silent archive, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. A few months ago, he had been nobody, a salvage operator hiding from his past. Now he carried the hopes of an ancient civilization. What do we do now? Asked quietly. Sun looked at his crew, at already examining the archive with wonder, at who stood then before, as if finally understanding his true purpose, at and young people who would help shape whatever came next. We go home, Sun said, and we share what we have learned, not just the technology but the lesson, that true strength is not about power over others, it is about helping others become strong. Months later, Sun stood before the Galactic Council, a gathering of representatives from every known species. They were there, their ancient eyes filled with tears of joy. Even they had sent observers, though they kept their distance. Behind Sun, on massive screens, images showed the garden. Human scientists working alongside researchers. Collectives studying alongside species that had been enemies for generations. The progenitor had become a shuttle service, bringing seekers of knowledge from across the galaxy. The architects built the garden for all of us, Sun said to the assembled species. It does not belong to humanity. It belongs to anyone who comes in peace, anyone who wants to learn, anyone who dreams of being better than they are. A delegate raised a question. What does humanity want from this arrangement? What reward do you seek? Sun thought of his wife and daughter, lost so many years ago. He thought of the long, lonely nights in space, the emptiness he had carried for so long. And he thought of the friends he had made on this journey, the purpose he had finally found. We want the same thing we have always wanted, he said. To not be alone, to know that our existence matters, to be part of something greater than ourselves. He looked out at the gathered species. Beings so different from humans, yet somehow connected across the vast distances of space. The architects gave us this chance. Let us not waste it. In the crowd smiled, nodded with approval, gave a thumbs up, stood at attention, proud to be part of something that would change the galaxy forever. And somewhere between galaxies, in a sanctuary of green and gold, the last architect slept peacefully, dreaming of the children they had loved enough to set free. The inheritance had been claimed. The journey had only begun.